Thank you very much, Sebastian, and thank you very much to the team at 360 Suites for having us on today. Good afternoon from what appears to be a very sunny United Kingdom this afternoon. I hope you are safe and well wherever you're tuning in from today. I'm Asad Mahmood. I work for iTelligence. I've been at iTelligence for 15 years. My background is data and analytics. Most of the times I am working with customers to understand the challenges that they are experiencing and then bringing to bear the SAP technologies to build, prototype and propose appropriate solutions. In my role, I work with a number of different SAP products, but in particular, the emerging SAP technologies, which includes, for instance, the more recent version of Business Objects 4.3, Analytics Cloud in a number of instances, and then other technologies like Data Warehouse Cloud and Data Intelligence as well. In my personal life, I am a cricket fan, more watching these days as opposed to playing, perhaps with my two young boys, whenever I get the chance. And if I have any time left over, I enjoy reading as well, and fiction reading in particular. Okay, so we have a fairly packed agenda that I intend to go through this afternoon. So I will be doing my best as I can to keep to the time and make sure I'm able to cover these different topics off. You will get a copy of the slides, as Sebastian pointed out a few moments ago. And just a quick word on the phraseology here about embrace and extend. So iTelligence has hundreds of SAP customers, customers that are running SAP applications as well as business objects, which clearly is the focus of this session. And these customers are particularly interested at the moment in determining how they can extend their analytics provision by going to the latest version of business objects and by embracing the new capabilities that has to offer around UI improvements and a whole number of other areas that you may have picked up in the earlier session. But it's also about embracing the new opportunity presented by Analytics Cloud and what the cloud has to offer as a complement to the business objects environments that customers have. So that will be a common theme running through today's session. I'm going to start off with a bit of a leveler on business objects, which I imagine most people on the call today have used in some capacity. I'm then going to move on to some use case recommendations, which will help you sort of chart a course on, which different tools you should be using under which circumstances. Then I'll say a few words on hybrid analytics, and then I'd like to spend a bit of time on a couple of demonstrations that I've prepared. One is using an imported data set from a universe, and then another demonstration which shows you some of the capabilities and some of the modeling parameters associated with a live business objects universe connection as well. I'm going to touch on some of the limitations I've experienced as well, in particular with the live universe connections. And then I'm going to finish off by revisiting what I said a few moments ago about our customer base, customers that are running business objects, and what I've found to be very effective in getting customers to build business cases and ultimately migrate to the latest version of business objects and embrace SAC as a hybrid topology as part of that as well. And I'll share some customer success stories with you as part of that section. Then I will conclude, and again, as Sebastian said, and I'll repeat, please do ask questions as we go through the session. I'll pick those questions up and answer them wherever I can. So over to Sebastian to take care of this first poll.
Yeah, just a quick question to get gauge your interest in where you are with SAP Analytics Cloud. So are you currently using SAC? I'll give you a couple of seconds to answer. Just give it a couple more and then we'll close it. Yep, I think that'll probably do. There we go.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That worked.
Yeah.
We've just got 2 more of those coming up in a few moments. That's interesting. So the results are that 62% aren't currently using SAC, but 38% are using SAC. And I've deliberately phrased the question in the way that I have, because if I included perhaps evaluations and trials and proof of concepts, I would expect the yes number, the responses, including yes, to be much higher. And that characterizes what I'm seeing with customers as well. So over recent months and probably the last 12 months, I've seen that the interest and the adoption of SAC has hugely increased, and one of the reasons for that, of course, is the interoperability with business objects. Okay, thank you for that. Right, so just very quickly, hopefully this is going to be a refresher for everybody on the call. Again, please do ask questions if anything isn't clear. So business objects, which I anticipate many of you currently have in place and are probably using on a regular basis, is, as you can see on the screen here, it's a comprehensive BI platform underpinned by a universe which allows you to connect to one or many different data sources, abstract the inherent complexities of that database or those databases, and present that information to users in a user-friendly manner in a medium that is the most appropriate for them, you know, whether it's reporting, dashboards, or some form of self-service. I'll come back to some use cases in a moment. So essentially, it's a way to cater to the many different information requirements that I typically see within organizations. Again, this is more sort of talking about business objects as it has been up to now, as opposed to looking forward, which I'll do in a few moments. This is just a elaboration of the earlier slide. So if you have a requirement for reporting use cases, then in my experience, most customers will be using Web Intelligence for those requirements, perhaps some Crystal reports as well. And then equally, if you're looking to design apps, dashboards, then Lumira Designer has been the product of choice. And data discovery use cases, you know, where people want very fluid access to information, they want to cut it in many different ways to answer different questions that they have, then Lumira Discovery has been the tool of choice in that instance, and Analysis for Office, of course, as the Microsoft Office client. So I guess just as an example, if you have users that have a requirement for information cut in a certain way, you know, finance and accounts teams are good examples of these, then reporting is probably the most appropriate medium for them. I was working with a retail organization a couple of weeks ago, and again, in their stores, they require, amongst other things, flash reports that just kind of set out their sales position as it is for that day or the previous week. Again, reporting capabilities within business objects are very suited to those sort of requirements. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if you've got users like buyers or people within a marketing function that really want to ask lots of different questions of the data in order to obtain the answers that they require, then they require something that is far more flexible and agile and responsive to their requirements, which the kind of fixed predefined reports clearly are not. And whilst not exclusively, but many times senior management, executive, they will have requirements for KPI oriented dashboards. Maybe they're not desk bound. Mobile consumption of that information is a key consideration for them, and the applications medium can be very suitable for those type of use cases. So I guess in summary, what we're saying here is within business objects, you have different mediums of information, And it really comes down to understanding who requires information and for what purpose, and then you can leverage the most appropriate format of information. Okay, bit of information sort of looking forward now on use case recommendations. So probably for the last 2 years or so, SAP have been on this journey of simplifying and consolidating the analytics portfolio, and particularly within business objects. And this is probably the simplest manifestation of that I've seen, and also the latest one as well, actually. So you can see this comes from a SAP 2020 document, and essentially it's saying that if you have any requirements for reporting, then refer to Web Intelligence or Crystal Reports. Most of the times Web Intelligence in my experience, but we do still have customers that are heavily reliant on Crystal Reports, or they've integrated those Crystal Reports into their applications. If you are looking for an analytical experience within your Microsoft Office suite, then you have Analysis for Office, of course, with your Business Objects installation, but you also get a version of Analysis Office with SAC as well, which I'll touch on in a few moments. And then essentially for everything else, whether it's discovery, self-service, whichever term you're familiar with, or dashboarding or analytic applications, the recommendation very simply is to look at Analytics Cloud. That's not to say, as per earlier slide and probably sessions that you've attended earlier today, that you don't have tools like Lumira Designer within Business Objects that you can use. But there's a clear recommendation here, which is underpinned by investments, innovations, and a very different way of building out solutions in SAC, which I strongly recommend that customers at least consider before they embark on any of these different use cases. So another key takeaway from this slide, and really takes me onto the focus of today, is a lot of the focus within the analytics portfolio when it comes to data discovery, dashboards, and those type of use cases is revolving around SAC. Sebastian, I'll let you take over at this point.
Yeah, so second quick question for you. Are you planning to migrate to Business Objects 4.3 within the next 2 months? Given it was out on Friday evening, so we'll give you a couple of seconds to answer before we close it. Actually, do it, Sad, if you want to.
Thank you. I think I'm just waiting for the results to be generated, which I can share with you. Okay, so a overwhelming majority have suggested that they are not considering it within the next 2 months, but there are some that have suggested yes. Again, probably the sentiment that I hear from customers when I speak to them as well, it's so I see a number of different reasons for this. I have a whole swathe of customers that I've spoken to recently that are on unsupported versions of Business Objects, and for those guys, they've been waiting for 4.3 to be released, and to use that as an opportunity to not only migrate to 4.3, but also use SAC. But then, of course, you have another segment of customers that are already on 4.2 and therefore not a unsupported version of Business Objects, and perhaps they're waiting out before they can evaluate, understand it a bit more, and perhaps even wait for some service packs to be released before they move across. So interesting insight. Thanks for sharing that. Now, when we talk about hybrid analytics, which is a fairly amorphous term, in practical terms, this is all about allowing customers like yourselves that are running Business Objects to leverage SAC. And the interoperability built between Business Objects and SAC that has been massively improving over recent months, and in particular with the 4.3, are particular considerations for that. Now, whilst I'm not going to cover each and every one of those different aspects, What has been very popular over the last year to 18 months is the connectivity to customers' universes. So like you, many customers I speak to would have been running business objects for many, many years. They're entirely dependent on the reports that are churned out from their business object system, and their universes have encapsulated within them all of the different characteristics that represent their business, the different measures, the intricacy of those measures, what things are included or excluded from profit or costs or whatever else it might be. And the real attraction in going to SAC is that they can use all of those definitions and benefit from the innovations that we have within SAC, whilst still ensuring that they are using that same single source of the truth. And all of their reports that have been developed in business objects are consistent with whatever they look to produce within SAC. So that's been a real winner in my experience in customers, business objects customers, becoming interested in SAC and adopting SAC as well. And I'll share some customer success stories in a few moments as well. And I'm going to cover this off in the demonstration in a few moments as well. Now with 4.3, that integration is further strengthened. So as well as the universe connectivity, we are now able to connect to individual web intelligence documents as well. So if you have developed web intelligence reports that contain lots of different variables that perhaps do not reside in your universes, and you've become dependent on those different objects within those web intelligence reports, it's now possible with 4.3 to use that as a data model as well. And then probably another thing worthy of mention is you're also able to synchronize users between your business objects and SAC environment. So it simplifies the administration involved there. And there's also huge improvements in content sharing within Analytics Cloud as well. So you've had these things called analytics catalogs within SAC for a few months now, which allow you to combine SAC content and non-SAC content. But with 4.3, what you're going to be able to do is synchronize designated parts of business objects with your SAC environment. So users could all go to SAC, and in there they would find their SAC stories, and alongside that the web intelligence reports that they require, and even third-party content that they require as well. Okay, so that's just a few things on the hybrid analytics and this whole theme of interoperability and deeper integration between business objects and SAC. And with that, I'm going to say a few words on SAC in a few moments, followed by a demo. But I'm just going to hand over to Sebastian again to help me with the third and final poll.
Yeah, another quick question. Do you leverage machine learning or predictive within your organization? So I'll give you a few seconds to answer. Just give it a few more seconds before we close. Yeah, I think that should probably do it. Assad?
Thanks again, Sebastian. So I'm just waiting for these results to be generated. Okay, so over half of you have suggested no, and a quarter of you have suggested yes, and roughly another quarter have said unsure. So this is a really important question, actually. And again, when I talk to customers about use cases that they have at the moment, the applicability of those use cases to predictive techniques, I find, is where the real game changer resides. And in SAC, and I'm going to touch on some of this as part of my demo, there are a whole raft of what I would term as predictive or advanced capabilities, which just massively improve the ability for users to understand what's happening within the data and separating the noise from the signal. So particularly when you have very large data sets, these advanced techniques can be very helpful in bringing to the fore the things that actually matter and you ought to focus on. So SAC has a very novel technique in my experience in how it applies that data science and makes those insights available to the users very easily and without them having to be data statisticians. I managed to pronounce that word today. So thank you for that, Sebastian. Right, so moving on to SAC. So SAC has many different facets to it. So I guess the utopia for an organization would be that they start the process by setting out their plans as they relate to revenue, profitability, production planning, headcount, emissions, for instance. And then over the course of the year, they would use the business intelligence capabilities and the predictive capabilities to understand how they are performing against those plans. And where variances start to develop, they can quickly and decisively act on those to close those out or maximize any opportunities that come to light over the course of the year. So it's a single platform that allows you to plan and then do the advanced and analytics and the business intelligence as well. You don't have to subscribe to all of these capabilities. You are able to just sign up for planning or equally the business intelligence functionality as well. And predictive, as is set out in this slide, is actually part and parcel of BI, and you'll see some of that in the demo now. So at this point, I'm going to come out of my slide deck, and I'm just going to check the pulse of my system, just make sure everything is still alive, and then we'll dive into a couple of demos. Okay,
Feel free to jump in with any questions via the chat box. Don't hesitate to ask any questions, which we'll come back to at the end.
Thanks, Sebastian. I'm just going to refresh this. It's probably timed out whilst I was going through my presentation. I'm going to assume that you can see the SAC screen at this point, Sebastian, and therefore others can as well. I
can see it, yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
No problem.
Right, okay. So I can sense some activity now. Oh, I'm just going to reload this page. So I have two demonstrations that I want to go through. One is using a imported data set from a universe, and the other one builds upon that using a live universe connection as well. So you can see here, because I've got a live connection in this particular story, it's now prompting me for my business objects credentials, which I am going to duly enter and hit OK. And then we should be into our story. Okay, good. So yeah, as I said, we're going to look at the import use case first and then the live connectivity as well. With the live connection, what I've also done, because I thought it would be helpful, is I've included a example where you can combine, in quotes, I'll clarify that in a moment, live data with data that you've imported as well. So that'd be a useful addition, I think, in the second demo. Okay, just going to maximize the screen and let this take up as much space as is available. Okay. So in this example, we have a fictitious university scenario, and I've used a number of different visualizations, which you can, of course, determine based on your individual requirements. So, if you have data that has a geographical dimension to it, then you could use a geomap, which are included as part of SAC, and you can look at the different territories and what relationships or correlations exist there. But equally, if you have data which is sort of KPI oriented, then you could use these KPI tiles as I've done here. And then I've included a number of other examples in the central section here as well. So just as an introduction to the context that we have here, we have a university setting, as I've mentioned, and we have a series of key performance indicators on the left-hand side, which relate to our university. So all of the things that this particular university cares about. What we also have in here is a comparison to a equivalent period. So it can quickly show you how you are performing in comparison to the equivalent period in the previous year, I think in this instance. But again, you can choose a comparative period of your choice, whether it's last month, last quarter, or last year, as it is in my example. The system also understands what's not good when it goes up. So you can see that it's suggesting that the costs have gone up by 31%, but it's flagging those up in red. So something I'd probably want to investigate further. And you can see that the maps are all interactive as well. And I could select particular parts of the map and then filter the data accordingly. It all has a role-based security model that goes with it as well. So if I was responsible for a particular region, a set of courses in this case, or products, if that's your scenario, then you're able to set up security in a way where it will automatically default to the things that you are responsible for. So in this example, I can see information across time. So I can see cost, and I can quickly see how that compares to the previous period by the variance charts that we have across the top there. And you can see that I can drill down into a particular quarter, and I can see how we have performed across the individual months within that quarter as well. If you have data that goes down further, then you could potentially look at individual day comparisons as well. Just a couple of other things just to help you build some familiarity. If I go to our income forecast, here we can see our different subjects and how we have performed across those subjects in all of the different settings. Ooh. Just get that into full screen. There we go. So we can see here, for instance, that the solid blue bar is indicating our actual performance as it relates to income. And then the shaded bar below that suggests the budget that we have in place, or a forecast, or whatever plan you want to compare yourselves to. And as per earlier comment, you could be using the planning capabilities that you have within SAC to formulate and manage those plans, or equally you could have them sourced from another system. An example that I'm going to share with you in a few moments happens to be for a customer that's using BPC for their planning data. So you can see in this example, I've just drilled down into those courses, and I can now see individual subjects. And again, you can see here, for instance, that the certificate of higher education in environment has actually bucked the trend. So the income in this particular subject is higher than the budget in comparison to the others. And equally, you can go in and you can begin an exploration as well, which is probably worth showing actually. I'm just conscious of time as well. So I'm just going to delve into subject analysis and open up Explorer. So this is a facility built into SAC, which will allow your users to start slicing and dicing the data and understanding what's happening. So again, going back to the examples I gave earlier around buyers or users within a marketing function, They could go in here, for instance, and focus their attention on science because it happens to be the largest contributor in terms of income. So I'm just going to filter that. Once I filter that data, I could go in and select and unselect different measures that I'm interested in as part of this analysis. So perhaps in this example, I'll just focus on the income metric. We also have here an option to select a visualization of our choice. So perhaps in this case, I will revert to a bar chart, which is universally understood. And then perhaps as two further examples, I'll select country. So we can now see the income as it relates to science across the different countries. If there are some countries that I'd like to home in on and understand in more detail, then we can hit filter on those, and on and on. So clearly, you know, the path that you take through this analysis will very much be dependent on the questions that you have, but you can see how easy it is for users to do that. And maybe just to finish off, I'm going to look at the date attribute and select the time series chart just to understand how things have changed over time. Excuse me. So you can see in this time series chart quite clearly how income for science across those different countries that I selected has fluctuated over this period of time. So I'm just going to exit Explorer at that point. Now, that's kind of, I guess what I've shown you there very quickly is the visual impact that you can bring to bear, you know, whether it's KPIs, whether it's these different visualizations or the self-service capabilities, which are all there really to help users understand what's happening in the data and hopefully allow them to make decisions as a consequence of that. Similarly, what we have in SAC is the ability to run smart insights, for instance, and this is where I'm getting onto the machine learning capabilities. And in this instance, the system will go away and profile the data model and identify key contributors to staffing cost. So it will look across all of the different dimensions that exist in this model and come back and report on things like science being the top contributor and by how much. And also you can see how it compares to others. I was also intrigued by Japan. There we go. So we can see Japan is the highest contributing country as well. And again, we can see how that compares to other countries as well. And you can run this smart insight across any of these different visualizations as you can with the exploration. Again, have in mind as I go through this that you could be doing all of this and depicting information as it is here for data that's currently accessible through your universes. Now, as one further example, you can also run a more evolved version of what I'm showing you here to really tap into the machine learning capabilities. This is called Smart Discovery, and the system will then use the various different algorithms available to it to do a whole bunch of stuff. So it will automatically produce these pages that I'm just going to rattle through here, which show you, for instance, the distribution of profitability. It will generate a time series chart with a forecast that you can alter. So anything that has a time profile, you can forecast and project forward and determine what's likely to happen. And then other interesting insights as well. If I go to key influencers, again, it will identify for me by applying the science to this data, the top X number of things in this model that influence gross profit. So in this case here, we can see, for instance, that address has an influence on profitability. And if I click on this link, I could see additional detail about the different countries and how they affect profitability. And similarly, there are other views that are produced as part of this smart discovery process. One further thing to demonstrate is the search to insight, which again is very popular amongst user business objects that are setting this up against their universes. So if I go into the search to insight option here, what you can do in here with both live connections and imported connections is use a Google-like search facility to enter your search criteria, and the system will figure out the responses to those searches. So for instance, if we go in here and put in show me total income, it should figure out that we have income in this particular model. There we go. And what that income is. Just as one further example for 2017, I think I have data for 2017 in here. It should identify that 2017 is a year and apply that filter accordingly. So if I just scroll up, there you go, you can see income for 2017, and then maybe by top 5 courses. And on and on. Again, if instead of the exploration facility, you prefer analyzing and searching for information in this way, then that's available to you as well. So just pushing on in the interest of time, if we go back to our story, we also have in here an example of a live connection. And there's a few things I wanted to point out here. Here we go. So I guess much of what I've shown you so far is applicable to live connections as well. There are some limitations which I'm going to turn to in a few moments, but what I've done for expediency is I've just used the same story and I've added a couple of analytics into this story, the margin being one and sales revenue being another, as an example of live connectivity that you can have to a universe. So when this refreshes, here we go, you should be able to see that both of those are being refreshed from a universe. And if you have prompts, for example, or filters within your universes, you can set those at a story level or a individual chart level as well. There is the option to set auto refreshes as well. So if you wanted this data to be constantly refreshing on a screen, a plasma screen maybe you've got within your support centers, then there are settings in here which you can set on and have the system refreshing on a automatic basis, and you can specify the latency behind that as well. Now, again, if I had the time, what I'd also like to show you is within the model, there are some settings where you can change the query dynamically, so you can add in additional fields, measures, you can use those within stories. It's very responsive and agile to connect to different parts of your universe and bring data through and use it within Analytics Cloud. And also, as you can see in this example, you can combine data sets as well. So with that, let me turn back to my slides. So I have referred to some of the limitations, but when you're using live connections, these things aren't available to you. So the predictive insights that I showed you, as well as being able to transform the data, use the planning functions, the variances where we were able to see how we compare this year to last year, and the geomaps, they're not available on live connections, but they are available on import connections, as you saw. Now, finally, just to wrap up, Itelligence is helping customers here through a series of assessment services that we offer. This is a way for us to engage with customers to take stock of what they have at the moment, i.e. their business object system, what use cases they have, and chart a course for them and provide the recommendations to go with that as well. So in a nutshell, we will work with customers over 1 to 2 weeks to run through these different activities, to understand what they have, examine their roadmap, the use cases that they have that are suited to SAC, and then provide you with recommendations. I'm happy to talk to you about that separately if that's something of interest. In the interest of time, I'll just cover off one of our case studies. We've been working in conjunction with 360, actually, with a customer in the utility sector to figure out the effects of COVID-19 and people, and particularly the commercial sector, possibly pausing their billing cycles, how we can understand how that revenue is likely to come back on stream, and how this particular company can prioritize meter readings accordingly as well. So SAC was able to help them with that immensely. Similarly, Aspen Pumps, they are using SAC to slice and dice data across their products and markets to really understand what's happening within their organization as well. So we have a whole bunch of customers that are using SAC currently with business objects that we'll be happy to speak to you about. A couple of takeaways, a blog that I wrote a while ago, and also a document from SAP that I find very helpful in setting out the hybrid analytics strategy. And at this point, I am happy to take any questions. We still have a few moments.
Yes, I don't see any questions at the moment. Feel free to answer. I guess you were very clear. But we'll see if anybody has any last questions to pop up. If not, we can wrap up, and obviously feel free to come back to Assad or ourselves if anything comes to you subsequently.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I can't see any, so I think, oh, hang on.
Universe prompts. Yep, Universe prompts are supported. I do have an example actually, which I'll be happy to take you through offline if that's of interest. I think, as I mentioned during the demo, you can either set those at a story level or individual charts as well.
Yeah, so, yep, there's another one's just come through there. Is there any alternative tool that comes within 4.2 instead of widgets tool, which is included in 4.2 or all the client packages?
So as far as I'm aware, widgets are not in the latest version of Business Objects, and the recommendation there would be to use SAC. And in SAC, you have a analytics application as well, where you can put in bespoke widgets as well.
Well, that's it. Thanks very much, Assad, for that. That was
Thank you.